Hi guys, you're in the right place if you want to learn how to draw by understanding what you're looking at rather than breaking things down into shapes. And today we're going to be doing this Belted Kingfisher. So you need your scrap piece of paper and a pen, something that's not going to be too blotchy. And for any of you who think that I'm good at this, I will tell you that this is like take 100 of doing this darn birdie. Anyway, but you know what? That's what learning is all about. So, I mean, there is just all reality, no AI on this channel. And I don't know, sitting proof of that. Okay, so gosh, let's just pray and keep our fingers crossed that this is actually going to be something that works out for us. So, okay, forget about this shadow through here. This is just my tripod. What you need to look at is the gorgeous photograph. I have no idea where I found it, which is like crazy because whenever I save anything off the internet, I always write down the photographer so that I can put the credit in the video details, and I did not do that with this photograph. So it's a real picture. It is not AI. There will never be a speck of AI on my channel ever. So yeah, this Belted Kingfisher, it is an amazing pose, and I absolutely love this photo. The okay, where to begin? The kingfishers, the Belted Kingfishers, hover over the river looking for fish. So they have a great big heavy bill and a great big powerful body to break through the surface of the water, grab the fish, and then they need to break out of the water to get back into the air. So it's not just the angle of the photo that shows this stocky body with this big head. It's actually the way they are. It's true that we're looking at the shoulders here and the fold of the wing against the body, and then the tail feathers and the tail up higher and the ends of the wings below. But they're actually very strong birds. And you see how the eye is heavily protected by these feathers around it, like a heavy eyebrow and a lower sort of like cheek patch to really protect the eye as the head goes into the water. So I think, oh, and this hairdo is 100% typical, as is this white nose patch. So I think at the end of the tutorial, if you can end up with the hairdo, the nose patch, and a stocky body, that's a win. So clearly in the previous 99 takes that I've been doing of this, I didn't end up with those features. So that's basically my objective today. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is, you see how like he's pointed to the right, and it's always more difficult for me to draw a bird when he's pointed to the right, because it just is. When they're flipped over pointing to the left, I sort of feel like you're, writing, and it's easier to be drawing the pen away. So just because I want to make things sort of challenging for us, I do intentionally look for photographs where the birds are pointed in different directions. That certainly didn't help with today's practice. So God, I'm going to shut up now and let's get started. So you've got your scrap paper, you've got your pen, and you got your coffee, and you've got your nerves, and you're ready to go. So you know how typically I start on the top of the bill going that way? Well, that's going to be super tough for me today. So what I'd like to do is start with the body. And if we can just get in some basic shading where the tips of the feathers are, maybe the tutorial can end with just the body. How would that work for a thumbnail? So we're going to start at the top of the shoulder here and see how thick he is through the back and the shoulders. So we don't want to have like a monstrous sketch, but let's just get some thickness through the shoulder and then straight down on the side, the wings, and these the feathers off his wing are just a little bit showing that they don't all lie perfectly flat. And we just want to use light pressure with our pen. I'd like to just do slight impressions of where the borders of the feathers are. Just to kind of keep us oriented a little bit. And just move through the photo. And if we do that, then maybe our proportions will kind of work out to our advantage. You know, the previous sketches that I did, I mean, like when I was practicing, like they weren't horrible or anything, but honestly, and it's not like I'm worried about embarrassing myself. Oh God, I'm long past that. But it's about just really not rushing. Okay, well, like I'm going to confess, the body was great. I screwed up the bill, and I totally screwed up the head with the last sketch that I did. So if we can just take our time, and all I want you to do is we're just getting in some of the impressions of where feathers and others start. We're not going to worry too much about shading right now, only if it helps us stay in a good position. We go from one feature to another. So that we can keep ourselves in a good position throughout the sketch. Oh, I think it's raining again. Which is good because we need it. Now, see this last feather on his wing, the underneath one that goes beyond the branch and ends down here. It's dark because it's in shadow as well. It's being shaded by his tail. So there is a feather here on this side underneath the tail, which is this one on this side. Okay? So if it's difficult for you to see, you can zoom in, right? Using your whatever you're viewing this on. I actually never knew that until I experimented. So it would be ideal if you just forgot about what I was doing and zoomed in on the photograph and then just did your best. Following the photo. I'd still feel like I had your company. So we want to be really kind of careful with the feathers on his back and some of these borders, because they do sort of it's these borders and these little shadows that end up giving his back texture. Where's this go? And show that his back is sort of coming out of the page toward us. And if we just try moving from area to area. I give the impression of these feathers that are kind of like bumped up on the top of the tail. And then this side of his body is quite a bit darker than the other side because just because of the way the light is. So once we get his markings down and we're kind of happy with what we've done, we'll shade him up so that this side is slightly darker than the other side. But we're not going to get heavy-handed because it's the way the light is on his back that sort of shows how his back is pointed, coming out of the page toward us. And now, one thing that that I struggle with is when I'm starting, I always think that I'm kind of like doing things in the proper sort of proportion, but by the time I get around to the other side, it's like hugely off. So what I mean by that is, like if I'm drawing a flower, which I have totally stopped drawing flowers. God, what a pain in the ass they are. If you notice that there hasn't been one video about flowers, like for over a year. But I digress. So I'll do one petal, and I think that I'm doing all the petals the proper size and doing a really good job. And by the time I get around the flower, the last petal is about 3 times larger than the petal where I started. So I've recently come to terms with the fact that it's okay just to draw the stuff you like. And I like the little birdies. So that's what we're sticking with. Okay, do you have like some nice kind of like bumps like this, scales almost, to show the tips of the feathers, and just maybe some of these darker patches on his back? Don't worry if your pen goes all blotchy on you, but just use light pressure where you can. Okay, I don't want to get all screwed up here because I just are you trying to do this video up into August? On this shoulder here, this right here, is a shadow cast by his head. Okay. Now, while we're here, what we're going to do is see how it's the roll of the feathers off his shoulder onto his back. This roll, I'd like you to try to get that in. So what we'll do is we just want to make sure we got a little bit of shading here, not solid, and a little bit of shading down here. And just be light with the tone so that you don't get screwed up and have to make them super dark. As this side will be a little bit darker than the other, but what I'd like you to do is just stay away from this. I want you leaving that white because we can tone that up. I'll just roll these feathers up onto his back. A little bit off the shoulder too. Now see how this is the tail, it comes into the back, and this dark spot right here is a shadow created by where the two wings are bumping into the tail feathers coming off his back. So, and we can do the same on the side. Not too uniform, and certainly not too dark, because we want the highlight. Lots of highlights. Especially on this side. And if you're worried about your pen being blotchy, like mine has been, go where you want it to be dark and then go up instead. Because that way, if it leaves a big blotch, it's going to leave it in kind of like in the right place, if you know what I mean. And then the tail is elevated. It's the lightest part. So what we can do is just use your pen, press a little bit more, do some darker areas just at the base of the tail to show where the feathers are layered. You're getting the tips in there. That's the top of the shoulder. I don't know really how I want to tackle that right now. The safest thing to do is just to have super light. This little gap here, we don't want to make it too big. This would be a really bad time for my pen to blotch out on me. I just want to very carefully shade in these feathers that are at the top of his back that are blending into his tail. And we're kind of like training our eye to look at the dark spots, because that's what we're adding with our pen. Oh, blotch. Make sure that we leave the highlights. The sun's coming off the shine of his feathers. And even here, the top of the tail, the feathers seem to sort of like curve. And if it's easier for you to roll them around this way because of what your pen can do for you, then that's cool too. And we'll darken up this side of him once we get the head done and we figure out what our final tones are going to be. Actually, this feather underneath the tail here, I need to bring down a little bit more. It's just the way it's folded that it's not sticking down as far as this feather. Okay. Now, what we'll do is see the top of the back and then onto this shoulder. So no straight line here, okay? We want to go up. And we're really going to take our time here, because if you've done a good job on the body and you rush and screw up the head, then guess what? You're deleting the video and starting again. So use really, really light pressure. And it's better to have this angle like lower rather than higher. So you can always bump it up to where you need to. Just have a very, very light border there. Get a bit more curve on its back. Okay, so what we're going to do is these feathers coming off his neck, the white there, and this is really going to help with our angle. So don't get too carried away, because and if your pen is going to blotch, all we're doing is taking our time, and we're going to see about the border. We can always extend it if we want to. Now, here we start getting into some of the dark feathers from the head, and then, so that's the neck, and now we're getting into the longer feathers that are part of the head. And you can change this border if you need to later. But what I'd like you to do now is just try to be super careful with the hairdo, because how you put the feathers for the hairdo are going to also show the curve of the head. So this, now we're getting into the back of the head. See how we're sloping up this way for the back of the head. And as I say, if you do it too small, you can always extend the feathers. But what we want to do now is just get down the angles. We're getting up to the top of the head. the feathers that are coming off, almost straight off the forehead. And as I say, if you end up sketching his head too small, you can extend the feathers and make it bigger. Now from the shoulder here, we go up and there's a tiny, tiny little itty bitty bit for his neck. Really, really small curve. And then up to the throat. And keep that small as well. Pretty please. A little bit for the throat. And then up to the bill. And the feathers that attach to the bill, they're past his body. So if your angles are okay, then you can do the same. Now with the forehead, okay, these feathers on the chin come out further than the feathers on the nose. Right here, see? So I'd like you just to take this, go up, and then go back in. And his bill is quite thick to pick up all those fish. So if you want to play it safe, you can have his bill a little bit narrow for starters. And then thicken it up if you need to. And there is, you know, off his forehead to the nose, and then the bill. There's just a little angle there. I don't want you going straight back. Now, just put in this downward angle for the bill. And if you're worried about how far out to go, don't put the end in, okay? So just get your angle. For the bottom part of the bill, there's that slight curve there. So I'd like you to have a slight curve to the bottom part of his bill. And then the top comes pretty much straight off his nose and just curves to meet it at the end. So I'd like mine to be a little bit thicker. I'm not saying that you can't go wrong. I've got plenty of pictures to show you how you can go wrong. But just you want a thick, heavy bill. End of story. And if you can manage that, that's going to be pretty good. And then there is quite a bit of you know, marking on the bill. We just shade it gently. Where is it made of cartilage? I don't know. But it does have some different, almost like staining to it. So check this out. These darker tones right to the end. Now, if you think you've done it a bit too short, well done. Just lengthen it out. Now, what I would like you to do next is let's do the border of the feathers from the nose, up the nose that bump into the bill. Have those feathers come back into the face. And then underneath the bill, there are some very small markings. So even though they're dark, I want you to keep it light, okay? Because speaking from experience, and screwing it up, I had these really, really heavy markings under the bill that just totally changed the whole weight of the head and the face. So I'd rather have you just do very, very small, irregular markings here to give the impression rather than exactness. And then just slowly work on the border where the white collar bumps into the dark feathers of the head. Now see in the photo, the angle is down more, lines out more. And I don't think there's anything that I can really do to change that, except just reduce this curve at the end of his bill. And then there's very, very light shading on his throat, so let's just put that in. There's some texture in those feathers. But if we just put in a little bit of shading, it's going to soften our line of throat feathers. Okay, so I would like you to just to darken, take your time, just go really super slow and don't do much, but I just want you to pull back these dark feathers at the top of the nose, top of the bill, just a little bit, because we want to get our spacing as good as we can when we put in this white nose spot. It's very important. It's a very specific feature for these guys. So when you put it in, I don't want it to be too far back. What's this? So I'm gonna put mine a little bit lower, and I want to kind of overemphasize it right now, because then I can make it smaller if I need to. And I just want to color around it. Now, have you noticed that we haven't said anything about the eye? There's a reason for that. I just want you to have some good definition. For starters, around the nose patch. Now, the eye. Oh, I hope I haven't been leaning into the screen all this time, you guys. Oh well, okay. Let's zoomy. See how you still can't see it? But here's the nose patch. And this pale part right here is a reflection of the light off his eyeball. This is how big the eye is. And this around here, because the eye is recessed so that it's protected when he dives, these are all feathers around the recess of the eye to protect it when he goes into the water. So how are we going to manage that? What we're going to do is take our dark, we're just going to like carefully shade this in. And you know what? How about we try actually drawing the eye in like we normally would. Let's do an oval. Now I'm going to make my nose patch smaller, okay? But we do have lots and lots of dark around the eye. This is just sort of to help us stay oriented, and I wanted to have a large patch like that where the light is reflecting off his eyeball, and that's going to help us stay sort of in the right position. And then I want to take these dark feathers around his eye. It does have like a heavier eyebrow. There's kind of like a lighter cheek patch, and I think this for now is okay. So just color in the rest of his head. Just light pressure, especially underneath the eye, because that's sort of like a patch. The feathers on the head, they're not all the same in tone. There's layering. There's some where they're darker, some where they're lighter. Got that cheek patch. And then where his the side of his face is showing flat, they're darker. Basically anything that you do is going to be okay. I just don't want it all the same shade. And then we can join up with our sort of like our jagged coloring of the where the head feathers join the white collar. Now this is a good time to sort of change the angle of the head, the size. As long as you try to keep this same border, and then these are really long feathers coming off the forehead. And this is a good time where you can change the angle. Of the head and the size as well. Because you see how the head itself is quite big in proportion to the body. I want to make sure that we try to duplicate that with his messy headdress. See, this is the side of his head going back to the back of his head, and see how it looks a little bit short on mine. So I'm just gonna lengthen some of these feathers and increase the density. And I'm pushing my pen out because I don't trust it and I know it's going to blotch. Now there is some layering in there with the white feathers, and that's what's creating the shadow. Now, obviously, the hairdo is all over the head, so there's some feathers that are pointing toward us, which the tips we don't see because it's dark, and those are the feathers that are causing this shadow on his collar. Now we're just going to put a little bit of texture in on the white there. Now let's go back to shading the top of his back. And this shading is just going to show the texture of the feathers. And also we want to have some kind of coloring to distinguish his white collar from his denim colored back. And oop, blotch. Thank you, no thank you. So now you can just like go back and increase the pressure a little bit with your pen, and that change in the pressure is going to give you slightly different tones. And it's those tones that are going to give you some definition to your sketch. Rather than making the decision too early about how dark to color him, then we're kind of like screwed later on if we can't get that variation. Just look for the parts that are dark. You're just wanting to add the dark part to your sketch. Okay, so now if we come around to this side of him, what we need to do is be very careful with our shading, but we've got to get the right side of him slightly darker than the left. To show how how he's highlighted on one side and not the other. So without sort of like obliterating all the shading that you've just done, we're going to leave this highlight on his back, leave the highlights on his back, but just very carefully shade him in on this side. So that it just shows that he's kind of, this side is to the light and this side ain't. Try not to lose too much of our tones that we've already put in. And then with the top of his back, this is very lightly, because we want to show that the top of his back, that's highlighted there, and then it just gradually gets a little darker over here. Oop. How do I want to do this with my pen? Do it upside down. I just feel like I've got slightly better control. I'm going to keep this light in here. Okay, so these feathers on his back bounce into his tail. And this curve just kind of shows how his body is curving downward. Do you have a good roll to his shoulder? That's what I'm kind of changing a little bit right now. A bit of a roll off the shoulder onto the back. Have I done him a bit too skinny? I think what I'm going to do is just take this out a little. Let's fatten him up a little smidge-a-rooney. Okay, now time to put in the branch. So what I'd like you to do is, you have to decide whether or not you're going to put in the toe, and the toe is right here. So if you're nervous about that, put them on a really fat branch so that we're not going to see the toe. But what we'll do is just cut this branch through about here. Take it that way. Excuse me while I try to fix up this feather a little bit, which is a bit too fat. Now, here the branches coming through around there. Now we've got the tail feathers. This one comes down, this comes down. Let's put it like that. As you can tell, I'm going to try to be brave and put that toe in. So let's just do our branch. It's darker underneath because it's in the shadow. It's definitely shaded under his bum and under the bird itself. You can leave a little bit of a border between the feathers and your shading for the branch, just to emphasize all the work that you've done by defining his feathers and his tail. You're the artist, you decide what you want to show. Now, this toe is pretty much under this wing here. He's got very thick big feet for catching the fish. I'll leave that toe just like that. Okay, now I think we are just about done. What I'd like you to do is darken up the bridge of his nose. Check to see if that white patch around his the bridge of his nose is too big. Leave the cheek patch. For the feathers on his head, there are some darker areas and lighter areas. So as long as you've got some variation in how you've shaded his face, you'll be okay. And I think, see how you don't, I'm going to like bring this in a little bit more. Very, very carefully. And I want to make his eyeball nice and dark too. And I think I might just tone down his lens. And then just, I'm going to break up. See how the border of the nose patch is not quite uniform? I just want to break up the border a little bit. Just so that it doesn't look like he's been hit with some white paint. Okay. Well, you guys are good luck Because I tell you, compared to the other sketches that I did, this guy's like not too shabby. See how these markings under the chin coming off the bill, it's a little bit bigger than what I've done. Okay. Man, I feel like running for the door before I do anything to like totally bugger this guy up. So I'm gonna call it quits right there. And say thank you so much for your company. I love it when you just like hang out and sketch with me. It doesn't always work out. But then you guys, thankfully you guys don't get to see those videos. Okay, so amazing. Good job, you guys. I totally am happy with this guy compared to what's been going on the last couple of attempts. So you continue to be my little good luck charms. Thanks for your company. Have a fabulous day. I'll see you next time.